Todd Helton belongs in the Hall of Fame. Most good and honorable people know this already, and yet he is not in the Hall of Fame. It doesn't look like he's going to make it this year, so as such, it would seem some folks still need a little bit of convincing. Feel free to share this video with them and, like and subscribe and all that stuff. Hey, my name is Creasman, and these are the top 10 reasons why Todd Helton belongs in the Hall of Fame. Number 10, the goatee. Look, it can't all be stats and facts. Hall of Famers need that it factor. It's right there in the name. On some levels, these guys have to be famous, and having an iconic look goes a long way. So, because he had a memorable one, and because this list needed to reach 10 entries, we can't forget that Todd Helton had the GOAT of goatees. Number 9, he had little help. There is a long and drawn-out debate about lineup protection and how much having other quality players around can truly impact another player's statistics. But talk to any MLB pitcher during his tenure, and they will all tell you that when they faced the Rockies, Helton was the guy they'd pinpoint and say, "Don't let him beat you." Despite rarely ever belonging to a dynamic lineup or a team packed with all-stars, and rarely seeing the postseason or even coming close to it, the Todd father was a driving engine for a little train in the Rocky Mountains. Number 8, he did it clean. Look, there's no way to prove this for sure, but Helton has always been adamant that he never used PEDs. He's never been found guilty, named in a report, or even had any rumors about use. Of course, he played against a lot of guys who were found to have been artificially enhancing their capabilities. The fact that Helton's numbers stand up well against players who had an unfair advantage speaks volumes. In fact, there are several instances where, during his era, the only players to outpace him were clearly cheating. We'll get back to that. Number 7, he's Mr. Rocky. Something that absolutely should matter in this voting process, but rarely seems to, Helton deserves extra points for being a player that has defined one of the 30 teams of Major League Baseball. Larry Walker may have had the better overall career numbers, but nobody doubts that Helton is Mr. Rocky. He played his entire 17-year career for the Rocks, came up through their system, and even famously turned down trades to more prestigious pastures like Boston. In many ways, he chose to stay in Denver and play for Colorado baseball fans, helping put the team on the map and captaining them to their first, and to this point still only, World Series. Number 6, he should have an MVP. One thing voters love to point to during these debates is major awards won during a career. Unfortunately for Helton, the MVP he should have on his mantle is instead sitting on Jeff Kent's. Anyone schooled in analytics knows that the 2000 MVP award is one of the most suspect of modern times. That year, Helton led the NL in hits, RBI, batting average, on base percentage, slugging, OPS, and comfortably in wins above replacement with 8.9. The next closest was Barry Bonds at 7.7, so not very close. Because of misunderstandings and misgivings about Coors Field, and a lack of seeing him actually play, the closest thing we've gotten to Ted Williams in his prime was rewarded with a 5th place MVP finish. But if we are looking back on his career for what he truly earned, and not just what he has, we should count that season essentially as an MVP award toward Helton's case for the Hall. Number 5, defense. Defense matters. Defense at first base matters. We do not yet have a fancy number to tell us exactly how much, and so a lot of evaluators leave it out of the conversation altogether. But take a poll of Helton's infield teammates over the years, especially those who played with other first basemen as well, and ask them how much of a difference he made. Helton was the proverbial vacuum cleaner at first, giving confidence to his teammates to unleash anything and everything in his direction that might produce an out. Again, the statistics on this are hard to judge, but just take a look at the extraordinarily low WAR outputs for fellow first base sluggers like Ryan Howard or Prince Fielder. Or compare it to players like Edgar Martinez and David Ortiz, who got to skip this part of the game altogether and focus solely on hitting. Helton was elite in both halves of the inning, something few first basemen in the Hall can claim. Number 4, consistency in chaos. While too many people are way too haphazardly deducting points from Helton's case because of Coors Field, almost nobody is thinking about the flip side of the coin. The ballpark clearly inflated his stats some, but as we will get to, we have other stats to account for that. What we don't have stats for is the toll, both physically and mentally, that playing half your games at altitude takes over the course of a season, let alone 17 of them. Coors creates chaos. It makes it harder to hit on the road, harder to stay healthy, and harder to remain consistent when you need to be making more extreme adjustments than anyone else. From Ubaldo Jimenez to Troy Tulowitzki and Carlos Gonzalez, players burn bright and burn out fast here. Helton is the one who withstood all of it. Number 3, the advanced stats like him. His career wins above replacement of 61.8 is just short of the average first base Hall of Famer, putting him comfortably within the norm. His peak WAR of 46.6 is higher than the average of 42.4, and his JAWS rating, a stat invented by Jay Jaffe specifically to measure Hall of Fame credibility, is exactly the same as the average first baseman already enshrined at 54.2. The league and park-adjusted offensive stat WRC Plus is notoriously harsh on Colorado players by overly adjusting to Coors and not adjusting at all for hangover effects. And yet, Helton's mark of 132 is better than Ken Griffey Jr., Carl Yastrzemski, Roberto Clemente, Ernie Banks, and Johnny Bench, and it's exactly the same as Tony Gwynn. The fact that Helton is right in the middle of the Hall of Fame class at his position in these stats really ought to seal the deal. Number 2, the traditional stats love him. If all of that was mumbo jumbo to you and you prefer your baseball stats old school, Helton becomes a slam dunk obvious choice. Home run. He hit .316, on-based .414, and slugged .539 for his career. If he played for any other team, that would be the end of the conversation, and he would have gotten in on the first ballot. There are only 18 players in Major League Baseball history who have hit .300 or better, on-based .400 or better, and slugged .500 or better for their careers. There are only 3 of those players who are not in the Hall of Fame. Shoeless Joe Jackson, because of the Black Sox scandal, Manny Ramirez, because of PEDs, and Chipper Jones, who is not yet on the ballot and will almost surely find his way to Cooperstown one day. Helton is 77th all-time in RBI, 81st in home runs, and 20th among everyone who has ever played in the majors in doubles. He is simply one of those guys. And number 1, he was, simply put, one of the best players of his generation. The point of the MLB Hall of Fame in Cooperstown is to tell the story of the game of baseball. And you cannot competently tell the story of the era he played in while leaving out Todd Helton. The only players who were clearly better than him during his time were either named Albert Pujols or were tied to PEDs. The only reason he doesn't feel like a Hall of Famer to some is that he spent his whole career being overlooked and underrated in favor of players whose statistics were not real. Yet somehow, Helton's stats came under far more scrutiny than people who ended up appearing in front of Congress. It's time to undo this wrong. It's time to give him the credit he earned but rarely received during his playing days. It's time to recognize the fact that Todd Helton was one of the best hitters, best defenders, and best baseball players of the last quarter century. His name belongs engraved in bronze and writ large in the book of baseball's history.